On the night of July 22nd, 1991, Milwaukee police finally discovered the horrendous secrets that Jeffrey Dahmer had been desperately hiding for many years. Acting on a tip from a young gay man who escaped from Dahmer's apartment, police searched number 213 and found a chamber of unimaginable horrors. Human heads and a heart wrapped and bagged in the freezer. Hands and feet at the bottom of his soup kettle. Skulls tucked away in a file cabinet. And this blue barrel stuffed with dismembered torsos soaking in acid. Dahmer would spend the next 24 hours confessing, telling in vivid detail of a murder spree that began in 1978 when he was 18 and ended with 17 young men dead.
I had this reoccurring fantasy of meeting a hitchhiker on the road and of taking him hostage and doing what I wanted with him. And I never in my wildest nightmares thought that it would become a reality.
Why would Dahmer have, as he put it, created his own Holocaust? How did he become so filled with evil? It would be comforting to point to an abusive childhood, an early life filled with hatred or horror, but his was filled with love.
Jeff was the most beautiful, darling, sweetest baby, the nicest young boy.
There just were no real signs when he was growing up.
Imagine your child grows up to be a murderer. Would you still love him? Would the guilt and sense of responsibility be overwhelming? Jeffrey Dahmer's parents have struggled mightily to understand what might have gone wrong with their child. His father's search for an explanation led him to look inward, even to write a book simply titled A Father's Story. But his search may be in vain, because even the experts and profilers who've studied serial killers are baffled by why they do it.
There doesn't seem to be any indication in any of the serial murderers that something external makes them want to kill. It's as if something is thrown, a switch is thrown, and they begin on the pattern of what their pattern will be.
Maybe all we can do is what Lionel Dahmer did. Look back and try to see what went wrong. As a young child at the beach with his parents, Jeffrey Dahmer discovered a dead crab. He examined it with a child's curiosity, but later the curiosity grew into something unthinkable.
All I know is that I wanted to see what the insides of these animals looked like. There may have been some violence involved, some underlying subconscious feelings of violence. It was a compulsion, became a compulsion.
Jeffrey Dahmer got bigger, and so did his compulsion to look at the insides of living things. He began to kill them, satisfying powerful urges that he didn't understand.
In 9th grade, in biology class, we had the usual dissection of fetal pigs, and I took the remains of that home and kept the skeleton of it, and I just started branching out, dogs, cats. I suppose it could have turned into a normal hobby like taxidermy, but it didn't. It veered off into this.
More and more, Dahmer killed animals in the woods behind his house. He knew it was wrong, but he couldn't stop. Then, at 14 or 15, it got worse.
I don't know, it became a compulsion, and it switched from animals to humans. I still don't understand it. I don't know why.
If your fantasy life as a teenager includes killing, who do you tell?
From about 15 years on up, a great deal of my thoughts were basically unshareable with anyone. So I just closed myself off and just put on a mask of normalcy.
As Jeffrey Dahmer entered adolescence, his secrets multiplied. He began to feel attracted to other young men. It was not an issue he could talk to his father about, but Jeffrey knew he was gay.
Started having obsessive thoughts of violence, intermingled with sex. And it just got worse and worse. I didn't know how to tell anyone about it, so I didn't.
And just as Jeffrey was becoming aware of his internal violent sexual urges, his external life began to unravel. His parents' marriage, which had been rocky throughout his childhood, finally ended. He found himself alone more and more. And then one night, while his mother was away on a trip and his father newly moved into a motel down the street, a fantasy Jeffrey had been having for years came true, and the killing began.
I was 18 years old, driving home. I saw this hitchhiker about a mile from my house, and he caught my eye. I drove past him, thought to myself, should I stop and pick him up, or should I just keep on going? I wish I just kept on going, but I didn't. I turned around, picked him up, and that's when the nightmare became a reality. It just seemed so bizarre to me that this obsession that I had been thinking about and wanting, just all the parts are there, and they make it possible to make it happen. Just at the time when it could happen, when there's nobody at the house for 2 weeks.
After the first time he murdered, Dahmer says that he tried to get control of himself, and for 6 years he did not kill again. In 1984, he found himself living in Milwaukee, frequenting gay bars, when the violent sexual urges overcame him again.
I met this guy at one of the bars, downtown Milwaukee bars. We went back to the hotel, just planning on getting drunk. I had put some sleeping pills in his drink to render him unconscious, and was just going to spend the night with him. When I woke up in the morning, my forearms were bruised, and his chest was bruised, and blood was coming out of his mouth. He was hanging over the side of the bed.
This type of behavior and the urge that develops, it's triggered. It doesn't go in cycles. It may be a place that he's in that reminds him of something. It may be something that he hears. It may be a certain season. It may just be a color. It's intimately connected with memory and previous experiences and something that goes on at an unconscious level.
Whatever it was, it came over Dahmer almost like a dream.
I have no memory of beating him to death, but I must have. And that's when it all started again. I had no intention of hurting him at all.
How could Dahmer not remember? It's hard for a normal person to imagine, but Dr. Helen Morrison believes that the brain functioning of serial murderers is unique.
Part of his mind is split off. Again, we have this piece of this puzzle that's somewhere that doesn't connect with the thinking part or the logical part. It's not far removed from those of us who drive every day, and we drive the same route, and we don't know how we got from point A to point B. We know we did it, but it doesn't enter our consciousness.
Unlike other serial killers who seem to actually derive satisfaction from the killing, Jeffrey Dahmer says he did not. His motivation, his objective was sexual. He wanted to create a sexual slave that he could totally control. And to that end, he performed the most horrific of experiments on his victims, literally drilling holes in their head.
I tried to create living zombies with uric acid in the drill, but it never worked. No, the killing wasn't the objective. I just wanted to have the person under my complete control to do with as I wanted.
Dr. Helen Morrison, who profiles these men, says part of the reason is because serial killers like Dahmer literally feel things differently than a normal person.
To the serial murderer, it's very similar to the young child who may pull the legs off of a daddy long legs or a fly. See what happens. There is no humanity there. It's just, oh, this is a very interesting thing. They do things to individuals that they've never experienced themselves. They want to see pain, or they want to see fear, or they want to see agony.
And with Dahmer, that experimenting included what had to be the most shocking part of this case. He sometimes ate his victims. An idea abhorrent to anyone with even vaguely human sensibilities. And yet, here again, Dr. Morrison says that, in fact, Dahmer's behavior makes a peculiar kind of psychological sense.
Jeffrey Dahmer was not the only individual who was a cannibal or bit his victims or used teeth as a weapon. If you remember about infancy, if we go purely psychologically, the only way an infant interacts with his world around him is through touch, feel, and teeth. And this is a way that babies explore their world with their mouths. That's what they use. That's how they relate to the world. And what is evident in all of the serial murderers is this trait of very oral or mouthing or